So we'll call this meeting to order. Adjustments to the agenda. I did want to make a slight amendment. I've talked to the real chair, Joe Pishnary, and he and I discussed agenda item 9 is the result of the director's performance evaluation. We will definitely do that, but he asked that we postpone any discussion or action on a merit increase until the July meeting, when we can have a better, a more full group of people to discuss that. So not that we can't have an initial conversation and kind of take the temperature, but we'll postpone action on any kind of compensation changes till the July meeting. Any other changes to the agenda today? All right, well, welcome everybody. Is there any public participation?
There is not public participation that I am seeing so far. If you'd like, Janine, I can go through the attendance real quick for our records keeper.
Thank you so much. I forgot that part.
Sure, no worries. So present with us today is our Vice Chair, Janine Parisi, Board Member Mike Fleck, Board Member Matt Keating, Board Member Terry Fitzpatrick, Board Member Howard Saxon, Board Member Joe Burney. From LRAPA staff, we have Steve, Julie, myself, Debbie, Cassandra, Chris, Lance, Max, and Robbie. We also have joining us is, let's see, my thing just moved, Paul Nielsen, an auditor, who will be presenting here as a report in a little bit. Mary Bridget Smith is legal counsel, our records keeper, Lydia, Jim Daniels from the CAC committee. And we did have one phone call listener calling in, a number end in 2742. That number 2742, if you hit *6 on your phone, you should be able to unmute yourself. Can we just get your name so we can record it here?
Trinidad.
Oh, hi, Trinidad, who's a staff member of the LRAPA. Thanks, Trinidad. And that is all present currently.
Thank you. Thanks for being so stealthy, Trinidad. Keeping us on our toes. Any comments from board members that we want to open the meeting with? Information share, thoughts? Matt, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. There's a story that was reported on KLCC about Oregon lawmakers approving $7 million in funding for local governments to create safe places for folks during extreme weather conditions. That includes warming shelters in the winter and cooling shelters in the summer. But the state also has 438 clean air scrubbers that can be used to filter air in emergency shelters in areas in which there's been dangerous levels of wildfire smoke. And since there's an opportunity for local governments to purchase the air purification equipment, I guess the Oregon Department of Human Services even says, quote, if they, meaning a local community or local government, need a truckload of air scrubbers tomorrow, they can call us and we can have it down there. I sent this story to Travis and to Steve, asking if LRAPA would consider such a request to secure such equipment in advance of a local wildfire event. So should such an event arise, again, strong likelihood it will, this may perfectly position LRAPA to expeditiously distribute such equipment right here in our own backyard. So if there's a opportunity to either get more information at our next meeting or put it as an agenda item in the next meeting, I would welcome that, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's a great topic for our next agenda or our next July agenda. And Steve, if you had any comments during director's report or wanted to respond to that quickly right now, feel free. Otherwise, I'll keep going.
Chair Janine, let's just move on.
Okay. Thank you for bringing that to us, Matt. I appreciate those opportunities and look forward to a discussion. Commissioner Burney, I think you're up next.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
I was unable to attend for obvious reasons, but my understanding was that last night there was a meeting that Beyond Toxics convened around Springfield's environmental issues. I was wondering if anyone participated in that, Steve from LRAPA, and if so, what in fact was the discussion and what occurred? What's the issue? Forgive me for not knowing, but I don't.
Chair and members of the board, I don't know the details of that meeting unless Travis can fill us in.
I was not aware that Beyond Toxics was having a meeting in the Springfield area yesterday. Any insight I could provide is I know that Beyond Toxics is looking for community members in the Springfield area who are interested in air quality topics related to industrial emissions or otherwise, and is looking to find those individuals to set up some sort of reoccurring meeting or community kind of organization like-minded in that sense. So my assumption is that was geared towards that, but I do not know specifically if that was the case.
So the short answer, if I may, is that nobody knows, including myself. And Steve, I would request that you find out and see if there's an intersection between that and this organization's interests, and either you or someone from there report back at our next meeting if that's possible. Thank you.
Chair, members of the board, so noted.
Howard?
Yes, I just wanted to pass on a compliment I heard from a friend today who lives in South Eugene. A neighbor of his saw a contractor working on a house that had popcorn ceiling, which is notorious for containing asbestos. And so he called LRAPA, and within 30 minutes, a LRAPA staff person was out there and shut the job down. So I just want to compliment staff on responsiveness. It, to me, is pretty incredible to have somebody come out within 30 minutes on a definitely a health hazard of which was unpermitted asbestos removal. So anyway, I just wanted to pass the compliment on to you, Steve, and the staff on your responsiveness.
Chair, members of the board, that's welcome news, and sounds like we're hitting on all cylinders some days.
Any other comments from board members? No one wants to, change the subject after that compliment, so understandable. We'll move on to our consent calendar. Any edits or comments on the minutes from May 12th? Any questions, comments on the expense report? That one came a little later. Hopefully everyone had a chance to take a look at it. Howard, go ahead.
Yeah, on the expense report, I looked it over. I was a little surprised that there wasn't any expenditures on training, and I know that we're dealing with COVID and things, but training, at least when I was working, training of staff was very important, and so I hope that in the future, that's one budget that we can spend, because it was unfortunate that there perhaps wasn't opportunities to send staff to training.
Maybe it was all free and virtual, so that's possible, right?
Chair and members of the board, if I could add a little bit to it, there's a bunch of training happening later this summer and into the fall that a lot of our staff are going to. And I'm also, I won't speak for Julie and her staff, but they've got regularly scheduled training for some of the software updates that they're getting ready to do.
Mike Flick?
Oh, thank you. So I was just looking through the agenda for the next several months. I know we had talked about having a discussion about air metrics and the viability of that, but I'm not actually seeing that on a scheduled agenda item. So I just wanted to kind of ask about when we were going to be discussing kind of the fiscal outlook of that program.
Chair and members of the board, I know we're working on a couple of things, doing the assessment that we said we are doing for air metrics, and it's also one of the director goals, but also there's a business plan that we're actually working on right now between Julie and Trinidad. They've been meeting on a weekly basis for the last month and a half to 2 months to try to get at some of those topics that need to be looked into further, and a report, as well as information that you just mentioned on the viability of Aerometrics is certainly first and foremost on our mind.
Okay, so could we maybe just put a placeholder in there somewhere so that we don't forget? We can always move it if, it seems like we need to put it out more, but I'd love to see it on there as a prospective agenda item.
We could certainly do that, and it's just going to have to coincide with the timing of when we have something that's worth presenting for your information.
Thank you so much.
And that's a great reminder. Thanks, Mike. Even a interim update sometime in the fall would probably be welcome. I think it's on a lot of our minds. So it came up a lot during budget committee, so we should circle back on that sooner than later. So I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent calendar.
This is Howard, I'll move.
Second.
We have a
Give it to Mike.
motion and a second. All those in favor, hands up, say aye.
Aye.
I think that's a unanimous approval. Thank you so much. We're moving on to the audit report.
Let me promote Paul here to a panelist so he can join and share his screen if necessary. Also, let's plug it in. Paul, I have your presentation if you would prefer for me to share my screen on that.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Paul. Welcome.
All right. Good. Good. I don't know if I have my camera turned on, but I know you want to get to them. You can have board members leaving at 1 o'clock, so you're going to get a real summarized version this today. So there's a PowerPoint that I've handed out. It talks about what auditors, some of the bullet points on what auditors' responsibilities are and what your responsibilities are. And your responsibilities, if you want to hit forward a few times, Travis, and this one's, I think, hit that 6 times. So you are responsible for financial statements, even though we draft them. That's the basic upshot of that one. The planning, and I'll combine a lot of these together, the planning scope, significant findings, difficulties. It took a long time to get the audit done this year. You probably are aware your records were, after Nazar got ill and then retired, Julie did a lot of hard work to get those records in any kind of position that they could be audited. Because there was a lot of things that needed to be corrected for that. So we had no significant disagreements with management. Management has not consulted with other auditors relating to the audit that I'm aware of. And the next slide's about Oregon minimum standards. And I'll just tell you, we test, and if you've been here before, you heard me talk about these things. We test things as required by state law. The money you put the banks you put your money into, how you do your budget, insurance. And I actually looked at the budget Julie prepared this year during the process, investments of public funding and public contracting. And if I remember right, you have one over budget variance in one of your funds. Julie does have a draft of the report right now that she's going through. So we'll get you that final when we're done with it. So the biggest thing to tell the board at this point in time is it took a lot of work this year to get the records ready to be audited. We were a little bit involved, but Julie did most of that work. And we're looking forward to next year where we can actually probably start this audit in August, potentially. Any questions?
Go ahead, Mike.
So I guess without seeing it, do we have significant deficiencies? I mean, give me a little bit of a overview.
We're going to have, we're having an internal debate about that right now because I'm leaning, we might have some significant deficiencies in the audit, but you've already got things in place to correct it. So, Mike, Gatlin probably, right?
Yes, I believe so.
he and I are the ones talking about how we're gonna handle this, so. As soon as we arrive, we're leaning towards significant deficiencies this year, which
But,
Well-
but no material weaknesses. I
no
assume?
material weaknesses, right? And those will go away next year, basically.
Okay, and when do we, as board members, think we'll receive the copy of that? Because I would love to take a look.
Next week or two.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bernie.
Thank you. So we don't have an audit report yet. We just have an.
Not yet.
An- oh,
This is
excuse
kind of
me.
an overview of what was,
Excuse me, an overview of a preliminary overview, correct?
yeah, that is correct. Sorry I interrupted you, but
But that's okay. You made some statements that kind of concern me unless it's the will of the board to gloss over these things. But it sounds to me like Julie's done a hell of a lot of work. It sounds to me like there was a lot of work to do. It sounds to me like our previous person in that position did not complete things. Is all of that due to ill health, or is some of that due to other reasons? I'm curious. Or is that something you want to share with us when we have an audit to look at?
in my opinion, I mean, I worked with Nazar for years, and this last year was untypical, even the work he did for a number of years. Whether it was ill health or he just checked out because he's retiring, I don't know that answer. I just know it was pretty messy, and it hadn't been like that in the previous years.
Thank you, Chair.
Well, I think several of us will be looking forward to seeing the review, and, deficiencies, I think are, it's not a criticism, it's an opportunity for continuous improvement. And if there's a path for improvement, that's good for the board to know, however they're categorized. And I don't want to speak for the rest of the board, but my personal opinion is I am glad to have Julie on board and thank her for probably what was a heavy lift of doing the cleanup necessary to get this ready for audit, and hope for a smoother process in the future, especially if we get these new financial systems in place. That will be an incredible help to the organization. So I sympathize, and I'm very grateful. And Paul, as always, thank you for your work. We look forward to your report.
All right.
Anybody else for the good of the order? I don't want to, this is important stuff. We're responsible for the financials of this organization. So I want to give it due time. I don't want to gloss over anything.
I will be happy to come
Pause.
back next month if you need me to talk more about it. That won't be a problem.
We appreciate that. We'll take that under consideration. I don't see everybody on my little screens here, so I'm assuming no one else has hands up at this point. All right, Paul, thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh,
Oh, there's Matt. Thank you. Go ahead, Matt.
I can't be the only one who's greatly concerned by the report we just received. So I would welcome a more detailed report next month, please.
I'll be happy to do that. No problem with me. So be very happy to do that.
Yeah, I think it'll be helpful for us to actually see the report and where the deficiencies were and what the corrections are to make us feel a little bit more confident, because right now we're just hearing, very high level information. So it's hard to, really give an assessment of criticality, but I'm sure Paul will be very frank and honest with us, and we'll have a better sense when we read the report. All right, I'm going to ask the board, just because I do want to try to make room for Joe to be part of our executive session before he has to leave. If we do the advisory committee and push the director's report till after the executive session, is that okay with the rest of the board? And that would bump the executive session up to about 12:45. Is that a problem from a public notice perspective?
Thank
Okay.
you all for your flexibility. I apologize.
Thank you. So let's go to the advisory committee. I think Jim was with us.
Yep, he's here. Let me give him, I'm sorry about that. Jim, you should have the ability to turn on your camera if you want and unmute yourself.
Okay. Let's see, camera. I'm not seeing that, so I'll just speak. So we met at the end of May, and the main topic for discussion was the source survey. That was our assignment last time. So we discussed past surveys and how we wanted it laid out. And after some discussion of details, decided to take the month to come up with ideas and do some drafts of potential questions. But the consensus is that we would do it by SurveyMonkey with some help from Travis, since LRAPA has an account with that. And beyond that, we had some discussion about the memo from Beyond Toxics, and also did some catching up with Chris Klein, who is our fire suppression representative. And he was on a fire last month, so we wanted to take that opportunity while he was with us to get updates on fire issues. So that's the nutshell. Oh, the other.
Go ahead.
The other thing that is still outstanding is we haven't had any more applicants, and the James Brewball appears to have dropped out. So we are left at this point with Missy Frost's application was kind of on hold, and wonder if you want to take that up. I could remind you that we did interview her sometime back and recommend her appointment to the committee. That's it.
Thank you, Jim. Matt?
Thank you, Chair. In the memo from Beyond Toxics piece, it's mentioned that there was discussion around a hybrid Zoom option for future CAC meetings and or public outreach, and that LRAPA staff, in particular Travis Knudsen, thought that there could be value in the CAC looking into various public outreach methods, but they would need to get board approval. Could you expand on what that conversation was, and what you might need from this board to advance whatever sort of outreach and public engagement you were looking at?
We don't have anything specific at that time. You know, we discussed, based on the public comment from a citizen in your last meeting, the possibility or option of meeting in the evening or meeting more than once a month. And as a volunteer organization, no one seemed inclined to do that, but we're certainly open to other public outreaches may be appropriate. We are already doing hybrid Zoom meetings, and people can surely attend at that point. And I think maybe as far as enhancing public outreach, maybe just getting the word out that if people have comments or concerns, they can feel free to send messages to the committee at any time, and we will take up those issues.
Any other questions or comments? I do want to go back to the Misty Frost application, but before we do that, was there anything else that anyone wanted to bring up at this point with Jim?
Chair and members of the board, I just add to what Jim has stated. The other comment that was made by the commenter was that having the meetings in the evening rather than in the middle of the day. And again, it was because of the volunteer and the availability of the CAC members themselves that they didn't act on that or even respond that having a nighttime meeting would be beneficial.
Understandable. It's busy, folks, and I think the Zoom hybrid option really does help with some access issues. So I appreciate that. I did also appreciate the question and recommendation about having more of an annual work plan, and I feel like that's part of our responsibility as a board to be more clear about maybe a couple of major projects that should be on that work plan and then fill things in as we go along. So, something for the board to be thinking about, to have more of a intentional use of our CAC versus kind of what I would call more of an ad hoc. So something for us to think about. I'm glad that you're taking on the customer survey, the permittee survey, and look forward to seeing what you all come up with in a month or so. So thank you for that. I do want to go back to the Misty Frost application. I personally am supportive of appointing Misty to the CAC. She served on the board with a number of us for a couple of years and feel like she's got good background and perspective, would be a valuable asset to the CAC. To be welcome to entertain a motion if anyone's ready to do that. If not, we can postpone this as well. But there is an opening.
So moved.
Thank you,
I'll
Matt.
second.
Is there a second? Thank you, Howard. Any discussion? All right, I'm gonna entertain a hands up, aye vote. Any opposed? I don't think I think that was unanimous of everyone here. And congratulations, Misty, you're not with us, but we're sending it out virtually, and hopefully Travis will circle back, and Jim, and welcome Misty to the CAC. Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we are going to move into our executive session. And I think before we do that, I have to read some important words for the record. So pursuant to ORS 192.660 2-F, the LRAPA Board of Directors will now meet in executive session to consider information or records that are exempt from law from public inspection. Representative of the news media and designated staff will be allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the virtual room. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session previously announced. As a reminder, no decision may be made in executive session. So we will pause and have whatever changes need to happen to our virtual meeting. And
Yep, give me a second here to put everybody back into the waiting room.
Mike, does that mean you're staying on mute?
I'm gonna try to, because I don't want you guys to go crazy, but they're putting a metal roof on right now, and it is, I don't know if they're grinding or what, but it is noisy.
I can't hear it as you're speaking, so you're coming across fine. So whenever you want to jump in, feel free.
And more, hold on, almost there.
So, and I noticed we had our attorney online earlier. Were we gonna propose having her in with us?
Yes.
Yep, I just gave her promote. She should be joining us as a panelist now, and I believe that's everybody, Steve, that's in there. And we should be good to go. Yeah.
Great.
All right, well, welcome to our executive session. We are meeting to discuss the evaluation of Director Dietrich. I thought I would start with just kind of, some of us have been through this a number of times, and one or two, this is a little bit new. So remember that you have received via email the director's self-evaluation that came separately. That has been used in the past as a method to evaluate as a board member the director's performance based on those 5 categories. So Steve has provided us with a number of his accomplishments under those categories. And then at the bottom of that sheet is a way to rank and evaluate for your own, for the benefit of the director, which is really helping him in his performance and highlighting areas of, great success, but also areas of improvement. So this is an important piece of work that we do as a board. So I hope you're availing yourself to that document. And when it's complete, the traditional method has been to send that to the HR director, which I believe is Julie at this point, and then that becomes part of the personnel file for the director. Now, that doesn't have to happen today, but I think that's something that we should try to all get into Julie and Steve by the end of next month. So with that, Steve, I wanted to give you the floor to just kind of maybe recap for the board, kind of your highlights and maybe some areas of challenge that you would like to be thinking about for next year. And then we'll, I think from a process perspective, just give each member, probably starting with Joe, so he gets a chance to participate early.
Well, excuse me, Chair. I've been texting back and forth with the 1 o'clock, and I'm going to stay through this. And
Okay.
then so thank you very much.
Oh, that's fantastic. All right. Well, now I don't feel quite so rushed. But Steve, please, why don't you take a few minutes and just set the tone for us?
Okay, thank you, Chair and members of the board. I know this is an important meeting for all of us, especially me, and I welcome your input and your guidance as we move forward through this. Everyone got from me through an email the form that Chair Janine has mentioned, and I used the same form as what my predecessor did. Did change the categories a little bit, but just to give you some perspective, I started working on this performance form in my first 5 months as director of LRAPA. And so some of the things that are on here, the entries on here may seem a little dated, but it covers the entire time of the last 12 months. And then at the same time, about halfway through, around January, I produced a document that was one of the agenda items on the board back in January. And it was the LRAPA's goals and LRAPA's mission. It was a crosswalk of the goals that I had come up with to our mission as much as possible. And there was 11 of those. And I'm bringing that up because early on in this performance document that's in front of you, which we can actually put up on the screen if it would be helpful, is an explanation of early on working on performance document and then halfway through producing the director's goals, which there are 11 of, and then the performance management form continuation with the entries that I've provided. So now you have a complete picture of these 2 documents were being created sometimes in parallel, sometimes separately, but they're related in that as I go through the performance category, the performance major categories, I've also already kind of listed in my mind how they crosswalk with those directors' goals as best I could here before we had the meeting today. But they're both available to you if you need to look at them more closely, even after we talk today. And if you have any questions for me, I can try to help you understand what my logic was with how they're set up. Okay. When you're looking at the document, the performance document, there are actually 5 major categories. The first one being strengthen community partnerships and improve community engagement and education. And what I've tried to do is list on the left-hand side is some of the expectations, if you will, or some of the category, some of the duties that would actually fit into that category. And on the right-hand side, under results column, is some of the things that we actually did. As a highlight of this one, I wasn't going to read every bulleted item, but the biggest one to note here on accomplishments, which spanned not only my time here at LRAPA, but my predecessor's time, spanned many years, and that was to get lost my train of thought here, my location on here. Oh, here we go. Is to help the effort when it comes to the TAG, Oak Ridge air quality issues, and how we've actually tried to strengthen not only improving air quality, but the relationship with all of the locality involved to actually help pull off the work that need to be happening on a regular basis to improve air quality. So not only is the money important and how the money's managed, but the duties that it pays for, the actual work that it pays for. And for calendar year 21, for example, 46 homes in Oak Ridge were enrolled in the program to get wood stove replacement and or weatherization. It seemed like this program kind of started slowly at first just to get things off the ground, but now it's starting to make some headway. Some of the challenges have been recently, not only because of COVID, but also because of the type of work it is and the distance from places like Springfield and Eugene has been to be able to get contractors willing to travel there to do the work so that we can continue to make progress on being able to do the wood stove replacement, the weatherization, all of these things that help with improving air quality. And at the same time, the extra challenges that are coming down in the future is EPA is considering lowering both the PM 2.5 and the PM 10 standard. And they're making decisions on that pretty soon, as early 2023, the year of 2023. So we'll be looking closely at how well our ambient monitors are getting that data that we need to compare to the new standard if it's set, but also the work needs to continue not only with the TAG 1.0, but later on I'll touch on the work that we're going to be able to add to the effort under TAG 2.0. So I'll leave that category there unless there's any questions, and I'll move on to the next one. But there are other things listed there worth noting. Under the next
question.
Yes.
In reporting all this, am I incorrect that Good Company is really the group doing all the work?
I wouldn't say all of the work. A lot of the groundwork is some of the work that they're doing. You know, LRAPA is still administering the grant. We're still making sure that, you know, that we're trying to solve the problems that some of which I just explained to you with trying to get contractors and get the right people in the right place. Also working with the city of Oak Ridge and their staff because they've had some turnover. They've got their own budget challenges, and trying to make sure that the other aspect of the grant that goes into policing the wood stove use.
I understood. So since this is the executive director's report, what % of your time would you say has been allocated to this particular task?
My time?
Yes.
For the year, at least 10%, but probably less than 20%.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt and sorry for the dog.
Okay. Okay. So the next category there is encourage staff performance and morale. And you see some of the bullets listed there on when dealing with the annual performance reviews, doing updates on the salary survey compared to recent market surveys, ensure staff development, you know, through training, and then participate in recruitment for vacancies. So it's almost immediately when I started in this role, there were two vacancies that needed to be filled. The very first and very most important one was when we hired Julie back in August, because as Nasser was retiring and leaving the agency, and we were in the midst of going from one budget year to the next, we had to close out the previous year and then start the new budget year. And it was not a very opportune time to be getting a new finance director. But thanks to Julie and her efforts, she not only kept us moving in the right direction, but had to also deal with things that weren't done, maybe up to snuff like they should have been, and be ready to go through the audit almost immediately after she started work here. So that helped us be able to still do the work that LRAPA does. And when it comes to recruitment, you know as well as I do, if you don't make time for recruitment, you never get the help you need. So you know, that consumed quite a bit of my time early on, as well as at the same time, working to try to secure some money with the legislature under Prop 112, which consumed an equal amount of time, along with Travis's time, to make sure that we talk to different senators and representatives and people in the legislature to be able to secure that extra the return to our normal amounts of 105 monies. And all along the way, as staff were being evaluated by the managers here at LRAPA, I've always reviewed the evaluations and put in my own handwritten comments on the work that they've done, pointing out whatever needs to be pointed out. Most of the time it's good things, but also some areas for improvement if necessary. So I'm pretty frank on those, and I take those as something that's very important that the staff hear about at least annually, if not more so. And then, so I'll stop there on that one unless there's questions there.
Did we do a 360 review this year?
No, we did not.
I was just curious. I know we've done those off and on in the past. And I'm not sure with a new director, the first year is really critical because obviously everybody's going to be making adjustments. And so, but I would certainly want to see that in the future. Maybe not even every year, but periodically.
So one of the things that we already are working on is 2 surveys that are being formulated to happen. Some of which start this summer, maybe one's a little bit later. One is the industry feedback using the same monkey survey format that we used in the past. And then there's also the survey of staff related to your 360 question there, Mike. And that one is being worked on. I think Janine has looked into some of that, as well as the CAC has been contacted through Travis to see how that actually will work, so that number one, the survey goes to the right people, the responses are collected correctly and confidentially, and then that you can compile the data. Okay. So that's all started already. We haven't executed any of those yet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I think Councilor Keating, were you next?
I believe Howard was.
Oh, thank you for tracking that for me. Go ahead, Howard.
Yeah, Mike, thanks for bringing that up. I know when I was working, I was with a large organization, a private sector as a senior manager, but the 360 review was an integral part of our annual performance evaluation. And I would like to see that implemented on an annual basis, because certainly, performance from our perspective is important, but with a small organization, I think the 360 review and getting feedback from staff on performance and all those other things is critically important. And so I would really encourage us as a board to require that in future years.
So when I hear that, it sounds like you need to have that coincide with when we actually do a meeting like this, to have that data available to you ahead of time, or what?
Yeah, I think it needs to be part of the annual performance review. I think that's a critical piece of it. And it seems like that would be the appropriate timing to have that as part of the overall evaluation of your performance.
Okay. I do have a question.
That's my opinion. I don't know what the rest of the board thinks, but that's the way I would do it.
I do have a question, and I'll hold it to the end, related to the timing of when all this takes place. My evaluation in general, when should it take place, and what is it really tied to? So you can have time to think about that. I'll ask it again at the end.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I think our timing's a little awkward, from when you started and this meeting, and COVID just makes everything so much harder. I mean, we haven't even met as a board in person with you ever. So it adds like a whole nother level of challenge for us and for you. So we'll get this all figured out. So go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. Adding my voice to the 360 review. I would suggest that it's multi-pronged. Beyond just your performance review piece, there are advantages of a public-facing element to that 360 review that could be advantageous to the entire organization. That's just my take as well. I wanted to hone in on the training piece that I believe Mike brought up during our meeting, And there was it was noted that there was a real kind of dearth of investments in trainings, but there are some around the corner this summer. And just at the surface level, it was impressed upon me that there were software or data trainings. And I was and continue to be supportive of organizations investing in diversity awareness and inclusionary trainings. And I wanted to know if that's on the docket, Steve, for personal, professional development within the organization, for not just yourself, but for the entire team. What sort of investments have been, will be, or could be made in such personal, professional development?
That's a good question. And I know of at least Julie and I have talked about it at least 2 times through the budget session. Because, we're looking at trying to plan your budget. You're also trying to plan training to try to say, okay, here's all the training we have to do. Here's some other training we have to do. And you hit the nail on the head there, Matt. This is inclusion training is another subject that we do need to cover with staff. I do not think they've had much in the way of any of this training in the past. I'm not sure how much it was even stressed, but it is talked about pretty regularly in the work we do, whether it comes to the public engagement efforts that we are embarking on and continue to have to do our work, but also as we go forward with any new initiatives, that we need to make sure that we're well versed in what all of that is and what it means, especially when you're engaging with the public.
Thank you. It's great to hear that enthusiasm behind that. And I'd love to see that come to fruition in the coming year.
Okay. Yeah, that's one topic that I think you can never learn it all in one sitting. It's an experience thing, and then you learn a little bit more, and as it evolves, you learn a little bit more. And I think that's what we're going to be seeing for quite a while. Okay, I forgot to mention at the previous. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, I'm sorry. Steve, I didn't mean to interrupt. I just didn't want you to go to another subject yet. The reason I raised my hand is I hear the political buzz terms, diversity and inclusiveness training, a lot. Now, as someone who worked as a young man with the Black Panthers in East Oakland, as someone who worked with Dolores Huerta and developed the country's first migrant farm worker training center, if we go down that path, I want to know what that means. I want to know what that actually means to staff, because so oftentimes what I have seen in units of government is a cool off thing where you actually spend money, nothing really happens, but people's sensitivity has somehow increased. So if we're down this path, I don't want to make any assumptions about what that means. Matt, I love you, but I'm just saying, this is my opinion. I hear that too often from people that don't have substantive backgrounds in equal opportunity and working with various diverse and marginalized populations. So I just wanted to make that point, as opposed to just saying, okay, yeah, we're going to do this and check that box. Thank you.
I really appreciate Commissioner Burney pointing that out. Just quickly, because I was mentioned, looking back at my time at Lane Community College, the 8 years I served as a board member, I would point to Lane as a model if any local government agency wants to learn more, to either connect with Greg Evans at LCC, or Dr. Hamilton. I know she's leaving. There's a new president coming in. But there's mandatory diversity awareness and inclusionary training at Lane. Is it great, or can it, or let me phrase that better. I think, as Steve pointed out, it's an ever evolving opportunity to learn. So thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah.
And people need to be open to the opportunity, right, Joe? So you can make a training available, but it's an individual commitment that everyone has to make to avail themselves of the learnings and walk the talk. And that's hard to evaluate, right? So because it is such a personal and value-based choice. So
well, not to belabor
challenges.
the point, but what I've seen, for whatever it's worth, and I'll shut up, is in government, it tends to be how are we more fair? How do we provide our offerings to people that historically haven't had them as much? how do we hire more people of different back, blah, 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 blah. In the private sector, or at least in real life, it's more, how do we create equal opportunities and employment for everyone? That's all. But thank you very much.
Right. I can add that some of the training that I personally went through while I was at DEQ started with pretty basic definition of terms to more advanced, where you go into situations and people have these safe rooms where they can talk about things without having to worry about being politically correct, to talk about their own experiences and how it applies to the situation that the training's trying to target. And then later on, the more advanced, you get into situations where, okay, if you have this situation at work or with the public, what do you do types of inclusionary decisions that you have to make. That's the more advanced stuff that you can get into.
Forgive me. I'm done. Thanks, Chair. I'm sorry for the diversion.
Yeah, it's not an easy topic for everyone, that's for sure. Okay, I forgot to mention on the first category how it crosswalked to the director's goals, but that strengthen community partnership and improve community engagement and education. It includes about 4 of the 11 goals from the director's goals. It's 5, 6, 7, and 10. The one we're talking about now, encourage staff performance and morale, crosswalk pretty nicely with goal number 2 from the director's goal, which is all about re-examining our policies and our procedures, our accounting software, and our benefits. I'm ready to move on to the next. Okay. Continue air quality protection and improvement. This is one dealing with a lot with the Oak Ridge maintenance plans and the redesignation request. That is one of the ones that span multiple years, even before I was here. And I just got to help see it across the finish line, and it's almost there. It's in EPA's hands. The public comment period ended yesterday on the last of the 2 plans. And now they, depending on if they got any comments, which I don't think they did, they can make those plans final, which is huge because it makes that area in attainment again for PM10 and PM2.5. And it also allows us to redesignate and do maintenance plans as if they're meeting the standard, which they are from an ambient air quality perspective. And we've already had at least one meeting with some of their staff in Oak Ridge who are trying to recruit industry to come to the Oak Ridge area, which is important from a job creation and economics, which they are really in need of. But there's no extra limitations placed on it, because if it had been still non-attainment, it makes the permitting work and who can actually do work there as a business more challenging, especially if you have considerable particulate emissions. So I can't stress enough how huge that is. And if I had to name the #1 priority of our accomplishments this year, that was it. It may not look like much on the surface, but there's a heck of a lot of work that went on, not only in our agency, but with EPA as well as DEQ to make that happen. And so this goal, this category includes from the director's goals 1, 6, 7, and 11. So trying to make sure that we improve air quality in Oak Ridge, like I just mentioned. EPA is always looking to make standards improvements in air quality. One of their programs deals with testing what's an approvable and a EPA certified wood stove. So they're actually re-examining how that was actually taking place to find out that some of the testing wasn't up to snuff. So some stoves were being certified and they shouldn't have been. So they're trying to correct that as they go through. So we put the best equipment in that we're trying to put in with our TAG grant, for example. And then also oversee the maintenance plan as we go forward is going to be important, that we continue to show improvements in the face of wildfires, which can really put a damper on your efforts to show meeting national ambient air quality standards. And you know that as well as I do when it comes to being able to breathe when you're outside. And then let's see. And any new requirements, new regulations coming down, either from EPA and or DEQ, we have to keep in step with that so that we level the playing field, not only in Lane County, but also compared to the rest of the state. That is equally important to not only the citizens, but also industry. So I'll stop there on that one. Any questions? Okay. Moving on to Cleaner Air Oregon implementation and air toxics reductions. This one tracks pretty closely with the director's goal number 6, which is, again, continue to find ways to increase CAO community engagement. And so we're doing just that. Some of you remember that we sent out notices last week for a particular industry that's going through permitting, and it has a Cleaner Air Oregon component attached with it. So with that, we are trying to make sure, because these are a whole host of 600 new compounds and chemicals that get to be evaluated for public health and how it may impact citizens living nearby, or people living nearby those facilities that we're issuing air permits for, and to try to make sure that they are included in any of those discussions when it comes to permitting, but also the results of the risks associated with those chemicals that are being evaluated under the Cleaner Air Oregon program. So we're looking for all kinds of ways to engage more with the public so that they feel like they're informed, for one, and number 2, that they're heard during our public involvement process. And I can tell you that staff like Travis and some others are totally committed to making sure that happens, because I understand in the past we've been accused of not being so inclusionary when it comes to informing the public, and I don't want to be back in that path ever again if we can avoid it, that we didn't do the right things. And so we're going above and beyond there where we need to, and then trying to be as informative as we can so that people feel like they're part of the process. So that's the gist of that one there. Questions? We have a number of facilities going through the program, and so the activity is going to increase. So the last category that I have, maintain critical functions within the budget. You see some of the bullets there, clarifying the roles to ensure fulfillment of commitments to our local partners. What I mean by that is that's, with Lane County, City of Springfield, City of Eugene, Cottage Grove, and Oak Ridge, making sure that for the work that we do, that they're equal partners in the work we do, but also in help fund it. Overseeing and update the biennial LRAPA, ODEQ, and US EPA work plan and semi-annual reporting. We do this on a regular basis so that we fulfill the requirements of the monies we receive, not only from EPA, but also through DEQ. Some of the strategies that we've put in place through the director's goals, when you saw the crosswalk document, the board is equally involved with trying to help make that happen and not try to help break down any kind of roadblocks. With the recent PERS, inclusion into PERS as part of our budget, you were part of that process to help us make the right decision to be able to be competitive, not only with trying to recruit new staff, but to retain our current staff for the long haul, because the skill sets that we need to be able to do the work that we do is not something you just go buy off the street easily. It has to be trained, it has to be taught, and it evolves just like anything else. And it's a specialized skill when it comes to the air quality work we do, and you just don't find those in every place.
So Steve, if there's, I guess, maybe just to leave time for the board members to give input, if you want to wrap up in the next minute or two, and then we'll turn it over to the board members.
Yeah, I certainly can. So I was just trying to highlight some of these things as accomplishment. The other accomplishment is some of the work I mentioned before with dealing with the legislature and the new funding opportunities that I know we've been in discussion back and forth several times now, opportunities we've looked into, whether it's the American Rescue Plan, whether it's continuation of the TAG grant and adding to it. We're always looking for ways to fund the work that we do, and I appreciate your support as we've tried to do that. So I'll stop there because that's the last category I had to highlight.
Thank you for that. So my intention here was to just give each board member an opportunity to provide some feedback, walk through some of the highlights of their evaluation against these 5 goals, and ask any other follow-up questions that would help you in your evaluation. And just wanted to see if there was somebody who is willing and brave enough to start us off. Howard, thank you for doing that. Go ahead.
I'm not shy. Steve, I think you've done an excellent job this year. I mean, and given what you've landed into, not only with the retirement of 2 key people, I mean, that basically ran the agency from a management standpoint, and then COVID. I mean, what a scenario for someone to take over an agency. So, I commend you for that. And I think overall, certainly you've exceeded my expectations. But one thing I'd like to see in evaluation, and I don't know, it's been done in the past, but in my previous life, one of the key things on a performance evaluation was the self-evaluation, which you've done a great job in going through all of those things. But one thing I'd like to see that's missing is you identifying areas where you need improvement, as well as things that you would need to do a better job. And what are those might be, whether it's staff resources or other things. And it seems to me that those are 2 pretty important elements of any kind of a self-evaluation on performance. And so I don't know if there's an opportunity to do that, but I sure would like to see that in the future. I think it would be very, very helpful. And I don't know if you have a comment or not on that, but
Well, just when I looked at this form and it asked you to rank yourself on these categories, I have a hard time doing that personally. It just feels like, okay, I'm always going to check C, middle of the road, because I don't want to offend anybody, but then I don't want to underestimate myself. I have a hard time trying to rank myself. But, is there areas of improvement? Always. There's always areas to improve on. And so, some of the things that I've always thought about, trying to understand more about the rest of when I first started here, I didn't know how the entire agency actually worked. I didn't know the ins and outs of what you do's and don'ts with the board. I feel a lot better about that now. But I think there's still more to learn when it comes to that relationship with the board, the duties of the agency itself. But more important, how does the public see the agency? And I've been hearing good things about how they see the agency, but then again, I hear individuals that say, no, that's not what I think. So what is the norm? What should it be? Once I determine, what I feel comfortable saying, if I had to rank LRAPA and the work that we're doing in the county and all of the partners, I may need more time to be able to say exactly what that is. If I had to, because it's assessment not only of my abilities, but also the agency's abilities to do the work that they're charged with. So I think I need more time to be able to get relationships with representatives of those localities. I think that's an area I think I spend more time, because COVID allowed me to, work more on internal things. Now that COVID is being lifted, I think I need to spend more time being out there.
yeah, well, and being in your position in a regulatory agency, there's a lot of course, the diversity of opinions, and the agency's not doing enough, to the agency's being overactive in enforcement, and it's a difficult position to be in, and then you're constrained by what the Clean Air Act allows you to do as an agency. So that I think the public may not have an appreciation for the regulatory system and what you can and can't do. And I think it's extraordinarily difficult to navigate that. And I think you've done as best as you can with that. And I'll just say too that it's been difficult for us as board members. I'll start my second year as a, appointed member of LRAPA, and we've never met in person during my tenure. And I think we're all sick and tired of Zoom. And I think being able to meet face to face, that human interaction is missing, and that has made it even more difficult, I think, for all of us, including the public, to develop that working relationship. So
I appreciate those comments, and yeah, I think I'm looking forward to it, just like you are, to be able to have sit at the same table kind of meeting rather than what we have here now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Howard, for those comments. I share many of those sentiments.
I'll chime in.
Go ahead, Mike.
So it's quiet on the roof right now, so I'll jump in quickly. Yeah, I'm surprised you didn't hear the grinding. So as I'm looking through this, Steve, I think that you've done a great job. Really, really thrilled with the direction of LRAPA. I guess overall, with the scoring, I would give you a 4. Just because I don't know enough to weigh in one way or the other on some of the matters. But let's talk about that too. Morale at this agency over the years has been a challenging aspect. There are things we can't compete with other air agencies on fiscally. There are complaints, about personalities. And I just would encourage you to really be diligent about trying to ensure ownership for employees in the agency, trying to encourage, folks to feel that they have, some say in the direction of the agency. And, obviously every leader is going to have different style, and I'm not judging. I don't have any reviews. I think in a first year, it's tough with the new director anyway, because they're used to one way of doing things. And so likely our reviews would have been mixed anyway, based on, people's reactions. So that would be the primary area I would want to make sure that we're doing. Also in your evaluation, I noticed an awful lot around in your discussions around CAO and air toxics, and then also about just air quality protection. The JH Baxter comes to mind that, for many years, it was alleged it was just smell, and now we're finding that there were actually some significant problems there. And I'm not suggesting we didn't do our due diligence, but I think a good agency would actually evaluate anytime they've missed things to see what steps they could have done that would have caught, those problems. Obviously, we have limited funding, and there's, like I said, it's not meant as a criticism, but just as something that maybe we should put in there as well as self-evaluating how we're doing, especially when we find industries are having challenges. Those would be my only 2 areas.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mike. When I first came in, everyone's used to a certain, my styles versus the next person's style. I could have come in and just said, we're going to do things this way and not even ask for input. I didn't do that. I needed time to learn how the agency actually operated and what they were charged with doing. But I also sought a lot of input from some of the managers that were already here in the roles that they were doing I did a lot of listening, not only from the managers, but also from the staff. I think I individually met with each one of them in the first month that I was here, and encourage them to write me if they didn't feel like they want to talk to me face to face, which a lot of them did. Write me their pluses and minuses of what they liked before and what they want to see in the future. And I didn't make any whole changes. I did a lot of listening first, but then systematically you kind of go through what can we change, what needs to be changed, and what do we need to do first, and be smart about those changes. We could have easily picked on the little tiny things first, but we picked on the base things that affect a lot of things. So becoming more efficient in what we do was really important. How we communicate was another. Did the org chart make sense and how it was organized? And is something slipping through the cracks? Or is there a different skill set we need over here that we don't have? So, and as a vacancy came up, what are we going to replace it with? It doesn't have to be stagnant. So I think when you ask the staff that if they came to me, my door is always open. If they want to talk to me, I'm approachable. And if they feel like they want to air something, that if it needs to be held confidential, it will. But I also want to make sure on my flip side, if the work they're charged to be doing, that they're trained adequately, but they're also going to be held accountable. You know, it's a two-way street. With only 19 people, every person matters in the work that we do if we're going to stay efficient in what we're doing. You know, G.H. Baxter, it's lessons learned sometimes. Sometimes I'm not saying that we did anything wrong either, but you know, different set of eyes every once in a while, maybe would have caught something different. Or more of a communication or coordination like we have going on right now with DEQ and OHA that didn't exist before, with the core team management that's taking place right now and the meetings that we have on a monthly basis. They're already talking about, when we're done with GH Baxter, what's the next facility we need to talk about, or the next issue, maybe not just the one facility that we need to handle as an, you know, multiple agency perspective rather than one agency finding a solution and hope it works for everyone else.
Well, thank you so much.
Go ahead, Joe.
First off, in any evaluation, I want to apologize to you, Steve. It's ironic that I didn't give you near the time I would have liked to, especially your first year. Ironically, we're going to be, well, I don't know if you're going to be, I'm going to be watching the first of the Watergate, right? The insurrection hearings this evening. And ironically, the first year you came in was my year as chair of the Board of Commissioners. And the day after I was elected chair, the insurgency occurred. And it was just a cluster of things from there on. So I'm sorry, I've not had the time to give you that I normally would have. I do want to suggest, even in the context of an evaluation, we look at a path forward. So I do want to suggest Lane County has developed a mechanism and a structure to very aggressively go after various federal dollars. In these infrastructure plans, there are so many categories of dollars that impact air quality and climate as it relates to air quality. And this county is going to be going after them strong. We have we've restructured and have a policy person that's overseeing several areas, including climate. His name is Steve Adams. You need to meet with Steve Adams yesterday, and you need to discuss the intersection of what LRAPA is doing and what some of these federal dollars are for. And you need to make that partnership. You also need to, as soon as possible, as we're coming out of closed doors, you have no idea. The Board of Commissioners finally is meeting in person. I'm immobilized for a few weeks. It is so frustrating, but you need to make a presentation. I'll help you. We'll do it together. I'll get you on the agenda. You need to present to the Lane County Board of Commissioners. You need to tell them what value they're getting for their investment in LRAPA. You need, if appropriate, to discuss a partnership that you're developing with Steve Adams first. You need to demonstrate action with that group. I'm only going to speak for that group. It's the only one I'm on. Now back to your evaluation. You know, think about it. You came here in a hole. We had COVID. We've now experienced Baxter, which was huge. Through that, you've been subject to intense community input and criticism from every side of the fence in every corner. What a wonderful opportunity to learn. What a wonderful opportunity to start assessing. And I don't think we as a board can do much but say, great job so far. Now let's figure out what the hell we're doing and what you're doing. We need to have a 360. We need to have a time frame that matches some type of fiscal year and that's well in advance of that, right? So that if there are any changes to salaries, that becomes part of a budget and it's not after the fact. We need to organize our house better. I found you, as you were going through this, kind of, you know, not really knowing what the structure was. We need to have a structure. And I just think you've done from a distance. You've done an absolutely tremendous, you played a hell of a game with the cards you were dealt. But now it's time to tighten up, clean up as a group, not just you, all of us moving forward. So I commend you. I think we made a good choice in you. I thank you for hanging in there. And I think there's a real opportunity to move forward here. And not just to say we're going after money, but to secure dollars this year, because federal dollars have never been looser in my experience. That's all I got.
Thanks for those kind words. And yeah, it was a big challenge. It was a big decision on my part to come here from where I came from. But I felt like I had a lot to contribute and a lot to learn. And this was the best mix to be able to get at both of those. And so, I want to continue in this role, and I want to continue to make LRAPA look even better than it is now. And some of those suggestions you've made, getting more relationships with some of our partners, that's exactly what I mentioned earlier that I need to do. And so if we want to do it surgically, like you said, with getting with individuals that you can guide me in that direction, so I can kind of prioritize that, that's great.
I can do it in my little sphere of influence.
Right.
We have other board members that have other spheres of influence, and they might recommend a different path, but I just wanted to put it out there because there's a hell of an opportunity this year.
Right. Matt's already introduced me to some of the folks dealing with the toxic polluters in City of Eugene work group that's gotten started last month. And that's going to continue. So we want to know what is LRAPA's role? Is it more engaged, or is it just providing us as a resource for a future decision that needs to be made? I think the jury's still out on that one.
Matt, did you want to jump in now?
Yeah, quickly. Thanks. Kind of picking up what Commissioner Bernie's putting down. Steve, you've been exceptional in regards to any sort of one-on-one engagement. If I place a call or send an email, you're quick to respond, and I greatly appreciate that. And in the bucket of strengthening community partnerships and improving community engagement and education, you touched on from my vantage point, from a municipal vantage point within the City of Eugene, the toxics chronic polluters work session we recently held. And I was happy to make that connection with our city manager, but I was a little surprised that LRAPA wasn't at the table, because LRAPA was mentioned often in that particular work session. Was that a failure on my part? Was that a decision that was made between you and the city to maybe have a more behind the scenes role? And what does that, what does a future engagement look like with LRAPA and various municipalities who might be having larger chronic polluters conversations?
So I'm glad you asked that, Matt, because like I said earlier, I think the formation of that work group, I think we're still trying to figure out what LRAPA's role could be or what it needs to be versus maybe what the group membership thinks it needs to be. I don't mind being, LRAPA doesn't mind being part of that, neither do I. What is our role in the group itself? Is it membership, or is it as an advisor, or what does it need to be, first of all? And then what's the end goal we're trying to get to, and who would implement that end goal? To be more specific about that group is one comment I can make. But what about other opportunities, and so we can prioritize what they need to be? Like I said, not to make this as an excuse or anything, but only 19 staff, we got to be smart about where their resources are used. There's the things we have to do, and there's the things we want to do, and which category does some of these opportunities fall in? And that, I'm not saying don't want to be involved in them, but just the question of how. What's the best use of our time?
Okay, that's helpful. I appreciate that. Finally, I didn't really see this in the document that, and there really wasn't a place for it, but I have to ask. with your experience at DEQ, how has that experience helped solidify LRAPA's autonomy and or better connected LRAPA with our statewide partner? Just from a personal standpoint, you're in a unique position. It's almost a Steve Young, Joe Montana kind of position. But you got a good arm and great experience, and it's why we hired you. So I'm wondering what that experience, how that experience has informed you in this past year plus.
Well, I think what it did, first of all, I kind of felt like I had a leg up to be able to, when an issue came up that was not just LRAPA wide, but needed to be talked about statewide, I had the resources and already had the connections with certain individuals at DEQ to start that conversation earlier and be that much farther along with trying to work on solutions together. J.H. Baxter's a prime example there. Also, when it comes to their weekly meetings that they have on issues that are emerging at DEQ that could directly affect LRAPA, if I'm not part of that meeting, my staff are, and it's like we're not out of the loop at all when it comes to some of the more important things that DEQ is working on that affect not only rules and regulations, but how things are implemented or initiatives coming from, say, EPA or even the legislatures themselves, because they communicate more often with the legislature than, say, LRAPA does. But I don't think we're missing out on any of the information. Is what I'm trying to say. I think it's helped us to stay more informed, and it was an easy transition for me to make from coming from DEQ to LRAPA. What it allowed me to do, though, is when I was at DEQ, I was more of a program manager, but my skill set, obviously you've seen my last year's worth of work, being able to manage at a higher level and still get into the level of detail if necessary, with depending on the audience. I think that's one of the assets I bring to LRAPA, to be able to build on that knowledge base and use it in different ways depending on who I'm working with and talking to.
Thank you.
Gonna go. Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Matt, did you want to, and that seemed more like a specific question. Did you want to provide just some general overall feedback on the performance evaluation at this point, or?
No, I think I'm in the kind of number 4 category. Personally, as mentioned, the expectations are exceeded, but I think that there's room for improvement, as Steve noted, in the strengthening the community partnerships and improving the outward facing, public facing engagement piece.
Thank you. Terry, do you want to jump in here and then I'll wrap us up?
Yeah, I apologize. I'm being the new member on the board. It's a little bit more difficult for me to judge you how you're doing, but I've reached out to other board members and they were all very complimentary on your performance. And, when you got different ideologies, both complimenting you, that's something to be proud of. So I'm still working on it, but I'll have it done very soon.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's tough to be the new guy on the block, isn't it?
All right, well, I think I'll try to wrap us up, and I really have to just echo a lot of what's already been said here. I mean, Steve, you offered, I think, a sense of stability and confidence in the organization at a time when it could have been a lot harder for LRAPA to continue to just perform its day-to-day operations with the loss of a long-term director and Nasser, and kind of filling those gaps at a time when there's remote work. It had to be extremely challenging. And I grateful for the level of technical expertise that you bring that allows you to be at a 30-foot view, but also can dive into the details and provide direction, especially as we're rolling out like a Cleaner Air Oregon program, which has got to be highly complicated. So I really appreciate, I can see that you are very skillful in your administrative and managerial skills, like that's coming through, and seeing some of the gaps and kind of knowing where to put your energy. And I think naturally you had to focus your energy internally this first year and get the house in order and get your feet under you. And I always appreciate when I hear folks say, I did a lot of listening and I didn't come in with an agenda for change. I really came with an agenda for support and how can I move this organization forward and keep it on stable ground and look for places to improve. So all of that really just gives me a real sense of confidence and gratitude for your efforts over the past year. I think that in terms of areas for improvement, there's probably an opportunity to do some of that shifting that some of the other board members talked about looking more externally and starting to better understand, what is the norm for LRAPA, how it works how it fits in this community, how it's perceived in this community, and how do you make improvements in those areas where you can really suss out deficiencies, because you are going to hear it from all sides, right? So you have to kind of make some of those judgment calls. That survey may help. The permittee survey, it's a point of data that can help. I don't think it's going to give you as much information as just your ability to kind of be out there and about in the community. And I guess one of my questions for you that wasn't clear to me is, what was your intentional plan last year, and how do you plan to kind of move that forward in terms of orienting and continuing to kind of embed yourself in Eugene as a new community and LRAPA as your home base organization. So I think I would have liked to have seen in your performance evaluation more kind of a structured approach to meeting one-on-one with the city managers or elected officials on some routine basis. And I'd like to meet, I think it would be nice to, have some of that off the record one-on-one conversations with your board members if that was planned in the future. And how do you kind of, get the pulse of the different communities? And I know Oak Ridge has taken up a lot of time, and there's significant need, and I understand that, but I also think that there's not a lot in this evaluation about the metro area and how we're going to make sure that the permitted agencies that we're maintaining compliance and keeping those permits up to date and kind of getting through that backlog. So all in all, I couldn't be more thrilled. I think that there's opportunities for lessons learned and continuous improvement. And that focus on the external partnerships and strengthening those with the agencies who help fund the organization is just so important for stability, because we've seen it, Mike and I, who've been here for a while. It can be fickle, right? We're in pretty stable, secure place right now funding wise, but I also look out into the future, and some of those budgets start looking more and more constrained over time, and the best security for that over the long term is to maintain those good relationships and show value. So
right, I agree. If you had to pick one positive thing where everybody had to work at home because of COVID, it did allow us the time and me to focus more of my effort internally to get the house in order, like you said. And we're made some pretty good headway, and we're proud of that headway we've made. And some of the fruits of that are yet to be seen, but we're not done yet on some of that. But I think it's allowed us to have enough of a stable foundation, like you say, to be able to start reaching out to some of the other partners in some form or fashion. I found myself with the few facilities I've already met with on their territory, and even some of the local partners that we have talked to, both in person and virtually like this. It seems to be a conversation. They're kind of trying to figure out who I am. They're kind of testing me a little bit. What's my idealistic way of doing work, and where I'm flexible and where I'm not. And I think some of that's still going to continue. What they're going to find though, and you may have already figured it out. I tend to be middle of the road. I tend to be what the rules say. I tend to be a referee rather than taking one side or the other. And I need to do what's right, just like the agency needs to do what's right. And we need to be smart about doing it. Resources and budget there's only so much of that. And we're always looking for new opportunities. And I welcome the other places to go look for some of this funding. And some of it may not be around for very long because of the current situation, but the next administration, things may be totally different. And everybody can recognize that. And I'm looking forward to being able to get out there more and be able to at least shake people's hands like I used to be able to in the old days, right?
Yep. Well, thank you, board members. Any final comments? I know we don't have a very full group today, but I want to just test the waters before we come out of executive session around putting an agenda item at the next board meeting around compensation. So as you know, and correct me if I'm wrong, Julie, there was a 2%, it's not cost of living, market adjustment was already built into everyone's salary. So that has gone through, but the board also has the opportunity to offer additional compensation based on performance. That could be one time. We've looked at lots of different structures over the years. We've looked at one-time kind of bonus structures because it doesn't, create so much of an ongoing budget issue. You can look at a percentage increase beyond the 2%. And Julie, I believe you threw out the idea of deferred compensation addition. So I just want to test the waters with the board about having that conversation in more detail at the next meeting in July, and whether we should be putting that on the agenda. Howard?
Well, I think we should, but I guess I'd like to understand. I mean, I know how it was done in the private sector. I have no idea for government agencies what the thinking is these days as far as merit increases. What the percentage is based on seniority or level. Obviously my past the range was quite a bit different for if you will, lower level staff, junior staff, as opposed to senior managers. And so I don't know what the typical compensation increase ranges occur, like with the county or some of the cities and things like that. I don't know about cost of living because I was in the private sector. We don't get cost of living. It was all based on performance. So I really don't. I'd like to have that discussion, but I really don't have a basis of information to understand what a merit increase based on performance should be for someone at Steve's level.
Mike, and Matt, if you've done this with city manager as well, it feels like in the past when we've looked at this, we've looked at ranges that were in like that 1 to 3% additional. Does that sound right to you, Mike?
Yeah.
2 or 3, maybe?
I think it depends. Typically, our city will look at what are the other unions and groups receive, and then typically that's one of the big drivers for the upper management as well. I'm a little surprised that Steve received an increase without approval of the board, because typically our city manager will not receive an increase until the evaluation process is over and the board's actually acted. And then often it'll be retroactive to the first of the year. So like I said, I'm a little surprised that there would have been one all the way already in there. So I guess what I would hope to see is a memorandum. Steve, feel free to, let us know what you're hoping. That's actually very helpful for me. I think knowing what the other staff members received as far as just the COLA or market adjustment or whatever we want to call it, what they're receiving, what the normal steps are in the other groups would also be helpful for me. And then, salary surveys are kind of tough because we're kind of an odd duck. We're not like another municipality or we could do that with the other air agencies, but they're in Washington as well, primarily. So that's a little bit of a challenge, but certainly, could be useful if folks are interested. But that's kind of my 2 cents worth on it.
Yeah, everything Mike said. It's going to be difficult to find comparable agencies because we're such a unique animal. And even if we do find comparable, wouldn't be comparable positions, similar positions with larger agencies, there'd be such a broad range. So that's a difficult target to hit. So I think that Mike's request for Steve's, where Steve wants to land is a really good starting point because we're in such a unique position.
Julie, you want to weigh in? I may have misspoke, so please correct me if I was wrong about the 2%.
Right. I did want to clarify that. Basically, the 2% is what is the July 1st increase to all of the ranges in our pay scale. So that's what that 2% is related to.
No, in other words, it hasn't happened yet.
Correct.
But unless the board were to say otherwise, Steve, your salary would jump the 2% with everybody else's to stay in line with everybody. Is that correct?
Well, it would only be
Or
a
you saying-
correction. Yeah, there is a range that an executive director can use, and that range would go up 2%, not necessarily physically relating to Steve automatically gets it.
And would it be helpful in the memo to see where in the range we are currently? Because it's my recollection that we tried to create when we hired the firm that helped with the recruiting, we tried to come up with a range that we thought was the kind of market comparable. And I believe that Steve negotiated something a little different from that, which we supported. But honestly, I have no independent recollection of what that number was and where we are in that range today. So maybe that could be part of this memo back.
Correct.
So we know where we're at.
Correct. I do believe that all positions were given the 2% last July 1st, but this July 1st, I had separated Steve's out as contract. So
thank you.
Could I also offer, there have been times over the years, like the city manager has asked for a stipend for cell phone because he was using so much of it on the job, or maybe mileage because of the amount of travel. I don't know if those are pieces that are already covered under our process or not, but just food for thought if there are some expenses that, are kind of outside of the current compensation that you want to consider, certainly. I think those are appropriate to bring forward as well.
Anything else from the board members before we end our executive session? So in terms of coming out, Mary Bridget, if I can just get your professional opinion here. We'll end the executive session, go back into public session, and it's my understanding that we should, for the benefit of the public record, just summarize what just happened at a very high level, or do I not need to do that?
I don't think you need to do that, especially because you removed that item from the agenda to talk about compensation. So you
Okay.
can just come out of the executive session, say, bring people back in, say you're back in regular session, and then you'll pick it up in July. That'd be just fine.
Okay, thank you for that. I had my notes in case I had to summarize, but now I don't have to do that, so thank you. That's great. One less thing for me to worry about. Anything else on this before we end our executive session? Steve, thank you for your candor and generosity of your time. I think that was helpful for me. I appreciate everyone's thoughtful input from other board members. So we will end this executive session, and Travis, if you can help us get back into a public session, that'd be great.
Sure, yes. So in the sense of meetings that are easier in person, which is everybody going into the door and then leaving or opening the door, people were essentially kicked out of the meeting and the meeting was locked, and now the meeting is unlocked. So people have the ability to join again if they choose. I sent an email to our minutes recorder to offer her to jump back in, but I don't know if we will see her between now and when we close out. This is being recorded, which we can send to the minutes recorder so she can finish recording those minutes. So at this point, we're back in regular session.
Awesome. Thank you, Travis. Really appreciate that. Our last agenda item, well, substantive one, is our director's report. So I'm going to turn it back over to Steve. And Terry, I saw your chat that you need to leave at 2. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
We're going to lose our quorum with Terry leaving, I think.
Yeah, we are.
But I don't think we have any action items to take.
Would that mean we have to officially adjourn?
Yeah, that's correct. If you lose your quorum, then the body really should not, the only decision you could make is if you were to reschedule this meeting. So if there's any action you need to take before 2 to get this done.
So the director's report is not an action item, it's information only. Are you saying that we can't have that director's report at this point?
That's generally, that would be my advice, is to not continue meeting if you don't have a quorum. Sorry.
Well, I think with that, we do have the director's report in our packets. Steve, a couple things for that director's report. When we look back at it in January, there were a number of, or July, there were a number of items for consideration for that July meeting. Hopefully you caught most of those, but I thought I wrote them down and now I can't find my notes. So
I've got 4 or 5 of them written down, besides the ones that are shown there.
There was the question about the air scrubbers, what happened with Beyond Toxics, putting the air metrics update on a future agenda in October and November, and there may have been one other. So just wanted to make sure we capture that for our July meeting, and unless there's anything else for the good of the order.
Well, there was an FYI. It's not necessarily part of the director's report, but there is an FYI. If I could talk about the new holiday that you need to know about. It's called the Juneteenth holiday, which occurs this year on June 20th. And it's no board action required. It's not part of any document that we were going to discuss, but we can actually, we intend to award that and recognize that as a holiday at LRAPA.
And I think that comports with most public agencies, Lane County, eWeb.
Yes.
I'm assuming the city of Eugene's doing the same.
Yes.
City of Springfield.
City of Springfield's working on it, I believe.
Thank you for that. Any other questions or comments before we adjourn? All right, well, you will be led handily by our chair, Joe Piscineri, next month. So thanks for bearing with me, and I'll see you next time.
Thanks, Janine.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.